Hello and welcome to my devlog. Today I'm making a video about my first year in game development, from how it all started to the games I've made, and I will doing it going in thorough details while playing the games I'm talking about on the screen. A year ago I decided to take a break from my PhD in anthropology and learn how to make video games. This is my reflection on this wonderful year, my takeaways from it, and plans for the future. I'll try to summarize key takeaways in case they might be helpful to anyone. Video games have been my main passion for my whole life. Even in the busiest years, I've been playing them for over 1,000 hours a year. Over the last few years, however, I have become increasingly interested in indie games, focusing on playing a lot of unique titles rather than a few lengthy ones. So, how it all started? A bit more than a year ago, I had a vivid and irreversible insight that I wanted to make video games. I've always wanted, but was always hesitant because games are often devalued in the circles I grew up in, so I always felt that I needed to use my brain power for some greater good, and that using it to make games is a waste. But the older I got, the more ridiculous this premise looked, and at some point I want to make games, and that's what I'm going to do now. As a caveat, to be fair, I was not completely at point zero. Over the last 5 years, I have already had dozens of Google Docs pages with game ideas and descriptions. I also had some minor programming background. I worked a lot in social data sciences for almost 10 years, where I wrote quite a few scripts in R and Python for data analysis. So I know the math, but I never wrote anything longer than 1,000 lines, let alone do proper architecture or OOP stuff. I even made my first game, Minesweeper, when I was 14 in Visual Basic without classes or even loops, just if and go to. So it was disaster, but it worked. I also have some business experience, so I can organize and lead teams, design processes, navigate bureaucracies, etc. So at first, a bit more than a year ago, I decided to collaborate with my good friend who has a PhD in computer science to make it our pet project, because I actually didn't want to dive into programming. Last few years I'm doing anthropology, which is very humanities-like field. But after a few months of getting nowhere with it, I decided that nope, I need to learn how to make games myself, including coding. So here we go. Godot was an easy choice. It's non-profit, open source with nice architecture, and is novice friendly. I never intended to make anything even remotely close to AAA, and almost all my game ideas were more about meta-narrative and board game-like strategies, so it sounded like a perfect choice, and I still feel this way today. And my first project was Minesweeper. The first game was initially intended as a learning exercise. I wanted to try as much stuff as possible in one game, which I wanted to make completely alone with all the art, game design and programming done by myself. The game is called Minesweeper, and this is the game's main character, Boris. And as a good exercise, I thought it would be nice to combine a few dopamine-trapped games, but I still wanted to make the game somewhat meaningful. So the game is supposed to be a dopamine-trapped game with a meta-narrated critique or satire of dopamine-trapped games. I wanted to combine as many addictive mini-games as possible in one game, where each game morphs into another game. In particular, the game starts as a Minesweeper, then at some point it becomes Match 3, then Color Blast game, then 2084, then Sokoban, then Sudoku, then Nonogram game, then it turns into a mining game, receipt collecting, and finally into Clicker or Idler. The funny thing is that all things transition seamlessly. For example, Minesweeper level, after being solved, translate into a Match 3 game with exactly the same tiles present. So the mines become something that can be matched in a 3-time game and so on. And there is a meta level to it that the game screen becomes part of the game itself. For example, at some point level boxes become part of a Sokoban game. Moreover, the name switches between the games, saving the mine as ... er structure, which made me adopt a full game name Minesweeper, which in turn fits into mine.s ... er. I won't give any more spoilers though, that's too much already. It was really hard to start as I had no idea what to do. For art, I chose pixel art as it seemed the most straightforward technique for a complete newbie. Just color the squares, what could go wrong, right? Well, of course it's way more difficult than that. And as for the code, I asked ChatGPT to write me the first version. I knew it sucked, but I sucked way more, as I never worked in any game engine before, so I just wanted some code to look and learn. So after getting a first AI version that worked, with me having close to no idea of how and why it works, I started reading docs and watching tutorials. In 2 months, I completely wrote everything, terrified by how poorly it was written by AI. But to be fair, in a few months after that, I looked with the same feeling at my own code and rewrote it again. So I've made 1/3 of the core game loop in 2 months, and I decided to join my first game jam. After the first game jam, I had to completely refactor the game as I found my prior code terrible, and just as said before, after the third game jam, I shelved the game, as I wanted to focus on the new game. Now the project is unfortunately dormant, but I definitely want to bring it back, most likely as my third or fourth published game. Now, after learning more about shaders, particles and stuff, I feel more equipped to make a proper dopamine trap game, but also it's no longer a project I can finish in a month or two, as I initially planned. I want it to have a proper amount of care and details. The main takeaway from this part was mostly about AI. While it produced garbage code, it served as a fantastic tool to get things moving. At least for me, it was a great way to make things tangible, which made it both easier and more engaging to work with than trying to breach through the blank page problem. I know the indie community mostly hates AI, but I can't overemphasize how useful it can be to breach the entry barrier. Just don't stop there and don't make AI produce a final product for you. Another minor takeaway, which we'll record later, drawing in pixel art and especially animation takes really a lot of time. After 2 months of playing with Minescrewer, I felt like I was ready for a real challenge, so I wanted to jam. Godot Wild Jam, as a main Godot exclusive jam, felt like a good start. To have a strong backup, I also invited my PhD programmer friend and we were looking for more people. So on Godot Wild Jam Discord, I found an artist and a musician, and I believe it was the first game jam for all of us. Since I was working on grid-based puzzle, I wanted to do something I felt within my current ability level, so I pushed for grid-based games. And since the theme was reflection, went for laser-based puzzle TBS game Space Tag. Space Tag is a bit between board games and the old school game Worms, one of my favorite games in childhood. Each player takes turns moving around the grid space where they can move and rotate the ship, move and rotate mirrors around it, and fire lasers. Fired lasers reflect through mirrors, can hit a ship, and can hit your own ship as well if you make the mistake. And of course, we did what almost everyone does for the first game jam attempt, we severely overscoped, and of course I was the main driver of it. If there was a complexity rating, we'd likely get the first place in it. We had the base laser puzzle-like game with moving, rotating mirrors and shooting lasers, ship building with several item types and 3 levels of upgrade each, 4 classes or characters with unique features, several types of mirrors and asteroid, a roguelike progression for around 10 rounds. I also wanted to make AI for each opponent, but that was like way over. It was extremely tough and exhausting. I probably worked like 70 hours in those 9 days, got completely burned out and stressed out, and also ended up adding some nice features that I didn't have time to develop and overdid them a bit. But overall, we did great. Fantastic even for the first game jam, at least for me. Way better than I could dream of just a week before the jam started. We got 15th position out of around 100 games, and we also got a lot of positive feedback, including people saying that they would buy a full polished version of this game. Unfortunately, we didn't proceed with the project though. My programmer friend was too busy with his main work, and the designer also didn't really want to continue. But our great musician remained with me, and now he's been doing music for 3 other games, including Minescrewer. So this jam experience taught me so much. First, of course, the pure game dev experience. 1 week-long jam was worth like 2 months of regular game dev experience. But it was also exhausting, as if the whole month was packed into a week. Second, I learned a lot about my weaknesses, my tendency to overscope, make things too complex for most people, and make difficulty outweigh joy. I still struggle with this, but I'm getting better, I hope. Last but not least, I got a huge boost in confidence in both my team leading skills and my prospects in game design. My initial hope was to make a game in a year, and now I have made a game in a week. Not a commercial grade for sure, but a game nonetheless, the one good enough to land in the top 20% of the game jam. Reassured and in high spirits, I went back to Minescrewer, completely reworking it with my new knowledge, and I was ready to participate in another jam. At this point, I even decided I want to make a jam a month so that I get 10-12 games by the end of my first year. That was pretty naive, I must admit. My second jam came in December, Christmas time, and for some reason, even before the theme was announced, I wanted to make a music-based game. Probably because a musician from the previous jam was the only person remaining on the team. So the second jam, we needed an artist. And I also found a random one on Discord. The theme was Freeze, and there were 3 great wild cards, and I wanted to incorporate them all. Driven by the wild cards and the holiday season, I decided to make a Christmas-themed rhyme game where you try to play various carols and tunes with bells in a freezing room. You play the rhyme game, but the instruments get frozen over time, so you need to crack the ice before you can play the instrument. There were also other objects in the room that got frozen, the TV that shows the notes to play, the speaker that produces the sounds, and the fireplace that controls the overall heat in the room, and some more. So we called it Frozen Bell. We've made a list from the most common carols, including different New Year themed songs from around the world, including Ukrainian Shedrik, Japanese Oshogatsu, Russian Little Spruce, and some more. In total, we've made 18 songs. We found the MIDI files, turned them into musical notes, and made the game. And we ended up number 22 out of about 150, which is roughly the same 15th percentile as the previous game. Great result. I hoped for more, to be honest, as my expectations grew, and that's like one of my biggest problems, my expectations of myself always grow. But we had 2 issues, so it was fantastic we rated so high despite them. First issue, just as last time, making things too difficult. I was afraid of making it too easy, but mixing the clicker and rhyme game made it too hard already. So we ended up with a very low score in fun. It became almost an anger game. But since it was framed as a cozy game, it produced more frustration than rage-fun emotions. For example, another anger game, which I personally loved a lot, got ranked much better. It was specifically designed to evoke anger, rather than just infuriating people as a side effect, like our game did. Funny side effect was a rather low score in audio, which was unexpected given how much effort we put into audio, but I think it was because making a rhyme game too hard is almost guaranteed to produce bad music. Another big issue was graphics, probably not because the artist wasn't good enough, but because they didn't have enough time to work on the game. Almost all the art was made in the last 2 days out of 9, and it was marginally better than mock-up art I've made myself and prototyping. I don't want to blame the artist, we all have our lives and obligations, but it's important to align what you expect from each other on a jam. His delays and unavailability made me spend a lot of time and energy making mock-ups, rearranging stuff, and worrying about whether we would make it at all. So the takeaways here are pretty straightforward and mostly reiterate the previous one. I'm making games too hard, sacrificing fun for many people, and drawing really takes time, and I need to pay attention to whom I collaborate with. Unlike the space tag, I didn't see this game as one worth developing further. It was more like a holiday meme, which I was happy to share with friends, so I decided to conduct some experiments to attract more traffic to the game and share it with a broader audience. I decided to make a trick on each. I gave the game $2 price tag and then submitted it to the winter sale with a 100% discount, and that worked. I got 5 times more views and 3 times more plays compared to what I got from the jam, and this was an interesting result. Looks like gaming ecosystems have way more prospects for paid games to flourish than for free ones. Quite obvious when you think of it, because they also need to earn money on that, but a bit counterintuitive, as I naturally assume that it should be way easier to spread a free game compared to a paid one, but alas. And now for the final form. Next month, as you might have guessed, I got into a new God of War jam. So this time, slightly disappointed by my previous experience with designer, I decided to test my skills as a solo developer. Although I still asked my favorite musician for the soundtrack, I decided to do everything else, including the art and sound effects. Just like last time, I already had a vague idea of what I wanted to do this time, even before the theme reveal. I wanted to create a game about coloring, probably as a contrast to my previous game, which was about sound. In particular, I wanted to focus on tile coloring, as I wanted to learn more about the tile map system in Godot. The theme was Metamorphosis. And tile coloring turned into tile transformation, and I added the idea of coloring units metamorphosed throughout the game into creatures that affected the coloring patterns and rules. So in this game, you control the elemental avatars that terraform the land using elemental powers, nature, water, fire, and air. Every night, the corrupt creatures come and try to destroy your land, and you try to fend them off. The game progresses with you terraforming more and more land, progressing your night form and making night fights more and more difficult. And given the theme Metamorphosis, I just couldn't resist playing some Kafka here. Instead of making the game entirely Kafkaesque itself, I decided to make the story of game progression a reference to Kafka. At the end of the game, when you reach your final form, you become a space cockroach. To make things even more bizarre, I found a Creative Commons licensed audiobook of Kafka's Metamorphosis and embedded some excerpts from it into the beginning of each stage of the game.
Oh God, he thought, what a demanding job I've chosen, day in, day out on the road. The stresses of selling are much greater than the work going on at head office.
To hell with that all. So as I've mentioned, I did everything except soundtrack myself, and it was the craziest jam I had. It took me about 100 hours, and drawing took a lot of time. Even if poorly drawn, I had to draw 100 pixel art objects, including all tile variations and different units. I was completely drained. But I really loved what I got. Moreover, I personally enjoyed playing it, even though I knew everything. I've spent a couple of hours playing it myself, and I felt like I captured something special in it. And this game had the best reception so far. It ranked number 9 out of 160 entries, and the main critique was that the game was crazy long for a jam game. Some people spent hours playing it. For me, this was almost a good critique. The lowest scores were, however, the same: fun and graphics. The visuals were just marginally better than in the previous game, although the score was good enough for me as I don't consider myself as a visual artist, and the game, again, was a bit too complex and not fun enough. But at this point, I kinda accepted it. I don't really pursue fun in games. Moreover, I won't call the games I like playing fun as well. I spent 1500 hours in Europa Universalis, nothing fun about that. However, the game got the fewest plays, views and reviews among all the games. Probably because it's the least catchy and the most demanding, but this was the game I loved for real. And it was the kind of game I loved playing myself, and it was a great joy to see other people loving it as well. And the main takeaway was, game jams are drugs. They are very addictive, and while they are fulfilling, they are also quite draining. And after the end, you also feel a bit devastated and emptied, as quite soon nobody ever plays or remembers those games anymore. I finally satisfied my ego desires in terms of good ranking and decided that I shouldn't really participate in jams driven by this desire. Now, if I do jams, I'd rather pursue other goals. For fun, to find new people, or even just for adrenaline rush. So I decided to forfeit my jam a month idea. Now I wanted to make my own full game. Finally. Be it final form or Mind Screwer, it's time to move to the next step in making games. Except, actually even before the previous God.Well Jam results were up, I've already participated in another game jam. This time, Global Game Jam. Since it was one of the biggest jams in the world, I anticipated participating in it for a long time, so I went for it right after the submissions for God.Well Jams ended, the very same week. Right before the jam, I had a conversation with a friend about what kind of games I want and should be making. And we were talking about how I want to make the game meaningful in a philosophical and existential way. And we discussed Buddhism and other models that portray people as having layered, deeper core levels and more shallow outer layers. We were talking about onion as a metaphor and what kind of game can be made with this metaphor in mind. And the next day, Global Game Jam announced the theme, and it was Bubble. What a coincidence. It was exactly what we were talking about the day before, so I started thinking of how could I make it into a game experience. For the Global Game Jam, I decided to join the physical site at a nearby university. I called my computer science PhD friend again, the one who participated in Space Tag, and I've recruited 2 students on site, 1 musician and 1 2D artist. I already had a pretty solid idea for the game, so we brainstormed a bit on the spot and went home to make the M-Pop. It is no doubt the game I'm the most proud of in the meaningful dimension. It is a bare minimum of a game, as it took only 48 hours, but we managed to create an existential experience of living and growing up in this world. In M-Pop you start as an empty bubble, a blank slate, a tabula rasa. You navigate the world and get affected by the emotions of bubbles around you, blue for sadness, red for anger and green for joy. And as you get older, you also start to affect people around you with the emotions that were imposed on you in previous years. Unfortunately though, Global Game Jam is not ranked. And while I don't mind the absence of ranking, Global Game Jam also doesn't have any mechanism of encouragement for people to play each other's games, which was kind of disheartening. While the physical experience of an offline jam was great, after submitting it felt more like sending it to the void. I never received any feedback from anyone on our submission, which was quite sad. Seeking to get some reviews and feedback, I submitted the game to 2 other jams. We didn't get good ratings there, as it wasn't quite fit for those jams, and we made the game in 48 hours and those jams were 2-week jams, but we've seen some touching feedback. Some people said that the game has made them emotional or reflective about their own childhood and their own lives, and such feedback filled me with joy, as that's what I eventually want to do with games, and it was exciting to see that such a bare minimum game can produce such effects. This episode taught me 2 things. First, that a lot of people actually like deep and meaningful games, and I shouldn't be afraid of making them. This shouldn't be an excuse for making low quality game though. And second, game jams without feedback suck. So as mentioned before, when the jam was over, I decided to stop going for jams for a while and focus on making a full game instead. I've been trying to progress on Minescrewer in between jams, but to no avail. If anything, I was rather remaking it each time with my renewed skill set, but not moving forward. So I decided to focus on M-Pop and Final Form. M-Pop was the closest to the kind of games I want to make the most, and the Final Form got very good feedback and might stand a good chance as a full game. So I started working alone on Final Form full-time while working on M-Pop at the pace that would match the rest of the team, who had other jobs and treated M-Pop more like a pet project. Unfortunately, after a few months of close to zero progress, I had to shelve M-Pop. So I ended up alone with Final Form and decided to put all my efforts in it. My musician was still with me and I was very happy about that. The main lesson here, which partially reiterates some previous ones, is that jam teams do not equate to real project teams. Real projects take more time, more consistency and more commitment over time. The jam games require a short burst of effort-reward loop, and game jams are drugs. Now I needed to figure out how to turn Final Form into a real game and where I could get the motivation and energy to do so. The next few months I've been working on Final Form mostly alone, but also with help of my musician. I was trying to build a robust architecture that would be modular and allow for all I want to add to the game. Terraforming, mixing different biomes, inventory and a huge variety of runes, accessories, skills, abilities, enemies, civilizations, quests and much more. A few months passed and I was quite proud of my code result. It was robust, expandable, effective and clean, but the game was ever so far from being playable than any of my jam games. I started to slowly burn out and wanted to find some source of extra motivation. I've also done some research on marketing and pretty much everyone said that the sooner you get some traction, the better. So I decided to start this devlog. On YouTube with reposts to some Discord channels, Reddit and Blue Sky, and to be honest, it was rather draining than fulfilling. It took quite some time to make and gave close to zero traction or feedback. It was and still is quite hard for me to figure out what I'm doing wrong, but it is especially hard because I myself consume very little social media content and thus find all this media quite unnatural for myself, but here we are. So if you are still watching this video, please let me know, I will be super happy to hear it. Another thing I tried, I found some local meetups and events in Toronto, and they were even harder for me, but mostly for personal reasons. I lately have close to panic attack states when I'm in loud, crowded spaces, and I'm terrible at small talk and other similar social interaction. So instead of getting charged by these events, I get quite devastated and drained. On the positive side though, I gave a talk at some of them, and it was a nice experience. In particular, it was really cool to present M-Pop at the Serious Games Mini Expo. I was hesitant to present it there, as I wasn't sure if it fits Serious Games classification, but it was a blast. I got a lot of positive feedback there, and it was a fantastic experience to see with my own eyes people getting touched by my game. The other few talks I gave probably converted to nothing, at least partially for the same reason as my online presence. I don't quite know how to navigate those spaces naturally, and my unnatural attempts at it don't quite work, but well, at least I enjoyed giving those talks because I like talking. But the main lesson I learned from all these attempts is game marketing is visual. Very visual. Extremely visual. Pretty much like all the online marketing nowadays. And I suck at that. And I needed a designer for Final Form if I wanted to ever get the attention it deserves. So I've posted an ad for a profit share search for an artist for the Final Form on Reddit and a few Discords, and after talking to a dozen people, I found a great artist who is now making Final Form beautiful. Here are just a few draft examples to show our current direction. We also decided to go for an isometric view. We are still pretty far from getting to a Steam page amount of art ready, but we really want to get there by October. This is how game looks right now. It's very drafty, especially in the art. Some art is already good enough, some is what I just drew by hand just as a placeholder, and recently I also added like visual effects, and my next step is learning shaders. So, as I've mentioned, I partnered with an artist for the Final Form, but it also pushed the estimated delivery date quite a lot. Not because he is working slowly, but because we decided we need good art. It's very hard to get seen without good art. This means I also need to learn particle systems and shaders as well. But September is around the corner and I'm getting back to university soon, so I wanted some final things to happen. To get some solid closure to my 1 year full-time game dev experience, I signed up for GMTK 2025 Game Jam, which I was looking at from October or so. So this time I decided to try being more passive, and instead of looking for a team, I created a post on Team Search app and was contacted by a few people. I then decided to join a group as a programmer. Going ahead, being passive didn't quite work, as I took too much initiative and worked like crazy in these 96 hours. After the theme was revealed, Loop, we had a brainstorm and I was offering the Sisyphus theme, trying to show the progression from Earth Age to modernity, and the designer suggested making Sisyphus a streamer. And here we are. Imagine Sisyphus Happy is a QTE, QuickTime Event, clicker mix, which imagines Sisyphus as a streamer. It has a direct reference to Albert Camus, as the idea of seeing joy in the meaningless grind of life. And I think we nailed it, especially given the time frame of 96 hours. And this is the best game jam result I've got so far. We got into top 10% in every category and in top 3 in narrative, which is quite cool for a clicker game. You don't really expect good narrative from a clicker game. Although this year the overall score was removed, but I really wanted to get our average rank, so I scrapped that gem ranking page and got the data, and according to the average ranking we are numbered 223 out of almost 10,000 games. This puts us in top 3% overall, so I'm really happy with that result. I've also made the average data public and you can find it, the link in the description. But the main lesson I've learned from it also reiterates my previous conclusions. Visual impressions matter a lot. Because of how catchy the thumbnail and the visuals overall were for Sisyphus game, we got a crazy amount of reviews, over 100, and playthroughs, almost like all my previous games combined. Wow. This also made it great material for the Steam experiment. After a bit of discussion, I persuaded most of the team to put this game on Steam. The best part? The gem version is polished enough to work as a demo for Steam Fest, so we can make it all quick and put out an extended and refurbished version in the winter. Very excited about it. And after a few weeks of preparation and moderation, we actually made a Steam page and are currently trying to get some wishlists. You can find Steam page in the description, and if you like what I'm doing, please support us, wishlist us there even if you don't plan to buy the game. Just wishlisting is good enough for algorithms and I will be very grateful. So now I need to learn a great deal about game marketing and all the related aspects of it. I've already accumulated some data and feedback on Capsule and trailer and updated them, and I will share the results of the game launch when if we get any interested data inside. With marketing, given my almost 10-year experience in market research, I do like working with data, I understand it well, and that's my strong side, but the weak side, trying to get in contact with curators, streamers and so on, given my social skills and my introversion, I hate doing that. But well, I'll have to somehow go through it. So, September, back to school. This was a fantastic year. Now I'm returning to my PhD in anthropology, but with an entirely new skill set. I can make games. A year ago, I wanted to make a video game as my PhD project in anthropology, but it was all talk. I didn't know whether I was actually capable of making the game and how many years it could take. Now I know I can make it. Well, maybe not a commercial grade game, but I can make within just a few months a game that's worth presenting in academic context, that's for sure. This opportunity also allowed me to land a TA position in 4 game design courses in different departments, which I'm extremely happy about, as it allows me to embed game making into my academic life through work experience and through teaching. And most importantly, as part of my PhD, I want to make a video game based on my ethnographic fieldwork. I study immigrants in Japan, and there is a popular trope there to play a gaijin card, which means pretty much behave like an asshole, hoping you would be forgiven as a foreigner. When there is a trope involving playing cards, I feel like I must make a deck builder out of it. And now I'm pretty sure I can. Although, as with everything in academia, it takes forever, so the demo version will be out in 2 years at the best case. Because now I need first to finish my own classes, which is 1 year, then do my fieldwork, which is 1 more year, and then have a demo. Although I do want to make a functional demo by the end of this academic year. And in parallel, I plan to keep working on other games. So, imagine Sisyphus Happy is coming out in first quarter of 2026, and I hope Final Form will participate in the February 2026 Steam Next Fest, and sometime after that, Mindscrewer and Space Tag. And I already have plans and ideas for 4 more games. My goal with all these games is not making money, although it wouldn't harm as it's pretty tough being a PhD student right now, but to make a community of people who like these kinds of existential and reflexive games, and games with unique complex mechanics. And I want Sisyphus game to be a first attempt at establishing this community, and Final Form to follow shortly after. Because these 2 kinds of games represent the 2 kinds of games I'm interested in making. So if you enjoy these kind of games, please join the community. So this is my reflection on my first year in game dev. It was a fantastic year, and despite getting broke while learning to make games, I think it was totally worth it. I hope some people will find this interesting and maybe even useful, and here's a short recap of the core things I've learned. First, making games is fun and rewarding. It even almost completely satisfies the itch to play games. Second, AI is a great tool to kickstart into game dev, to build the first prototype and to learn how things work, but not something to rely on in the long term, although Copilot is still quite good, especially for comments and documentation. Game jams are a great way to learn and test yourself, but be prepared to squeeze all your time and energy into it. It is very costly in this regard, but totally worth it. But also, game jams are drugs. They are very rewarding, but have withdrawal and make you feel squeezed dry, with not enough energy to work on other stuff. Real games require way more motivation management to keep to your commitments. It's hard, but very important to find motivation to keep things rolling. And marketing in games is almost 100% visual. Either great art, or some visibly recognizable jokes, memes, or some other stuff that attracts attention. Most of the algorithms, etc. are pretty snowballing, and minor changes in how catchy things are can get you a 10x change in visibility. So that's it for today. As always, thanks for watching. Please let me know if anybody watched until this point. And from now on, I will be making just one devlog every month, or at least will try to do so, because I have like way more stuff going on right now. And see you in about a month.